All right, welcome to today's episode of the Art of Online Business podcast. I'm Rick Mulready. Happy New Year. This is the first episode of 2023. Hope your holidays were awesome. And I wanted to dive into the show here in the new year with an episode, with a type of episode that I've done the past few years, and they're always really successful episodes throughout the year. And that is kind of sharing my thoughts on the upcoming year. I'm not into doing forecasts or predictions or anything like that. Nothing against people who do. I'm just like, it's so hard to predict anything that's going to happen, especially what we've seen over the past few years. And so what I'd rather do and what I'm going to do today is kind of share with you my thoughts about what I'm seeing in the online space, and then also what I see as a matter of working with, 30 different types of online entrepreneurs in my Accelerator coaching program. I have access to a lot of different types of businesses and a lot of different types of strategies and mindsets and all that, in addition to, my own 9 years of success in running an online business. And so I want to share with you 9 thoughts. That's actually 10 because I have a bonus one for you. And I want to start right out with that bonus one. And this is sort of like, if you don't have this in place, it's going to be very, very hard to be successful in your business, or you'll get there, but it's going to take a lot of time. And I'm saying this from experience. So, and what this is trusting yourself. Here's what I mean by that. Years ago, I used to come up with ideas, to do in the business, or, maybe doing something in the business already. And I was like, oh, maybe I tried this, or, I'm thinking about doing this instead, or whatever it might be. And what I would do is I would go to literally 5 different people and ask for their opinion on whatever that idea was, or whatever that thought I was having was. And I would get their opinion on what they thought about it. And I would get 5 different opinions. And so by the time I was done with asking for everybody's opinion, I was more confused than I was when I started. And what I realized, this was several years ago, what I realized is that I needed to trust myself. I had a ton of evidence that I know really, really well how to grow a very successful online business. And I started to believe more in myself from that perspective. And so a lot of that came from, trusting in what my ideas were, or what my thoughts were, etc. And so again, this was a hard lesson, to learn years and years ago. But once I did, things got so much easier from, a taking action standpoint, because when you trust yourself, you know that you can't do wrong. What I mean by that is, it's the whole cliche of like, there's no failure, right? If we try something and it doesn't work, okay, great. What do we learn from that? And the key there is speed to next action. So what did we learn from whatever just didn't work to moving on to the next thing and trying something else, using the knowledge that we just took from whatever it is that we tried that didn't quote unquote work. And so I see this a lot in, a lot of the students that I work with, or there's that trust in themselves that's a challenge. And when they have great ideas, something holds them back from moving forward, right? And there's a deeper thing that's going on there that, we're not going to dive into in this episode, but that I like to dive into with people when these types of things come up. But I see this sort of theme, and it's an overarching theme I see a lot across the board, even with established online course creators and coaches. It's that you've got to trust yourself. When you trust yourself in moving forward, and even moving forward, especially moving forward in the face of that uncertainty, that's when you're going to be getting ahead in your business and getting to wherever it is that you want to be going. Okay. So that's sort of the bonus thought to be a successful online business owner, is to trust yourself. Okay. And by the way, I'm gearing this conversation to the established course creator, established membership creator, or established coach in your online business. Now, of course, all of the stuff I'm going to talk about will also be relevant to, if you're in the earlier stages of business, especially like trust yourself, but that's who I'm kind of speaking to you today. All right. So my first thought so I'm going to start out here, by the way, with some of the like less marketing-y kind of things, and focus first on the mindset and the leadership part of having a successful online business. Okay. So official number one is improving yourself as a leader in 2023 is going to happen so much, I think, faster and more clearly by taking a more human approach to your team. And what I mean by that is, and I was guilty of this for a long time as well, is we're kind of like, we get caught in we have so much to do. I just want people to do what they're supposed to be doing on the team and get their work done, and then just keep moving through stuff, right? Like getting things done in the business, when we don't really take time to get to know them as actual people. What are their interests? What are their goals outside of the business? Even going so far as not even going so far, this is a basic thing. I'm actually going to do a podcast episode about this coming up, specifically about this topic, but giving them context when you're talking to them about owning something in the business, right? So why are you having them do whatever project that you want them to do? How does it fit into the overall vision, rather than just assigning it to them and saying, go do this, which is not taking the human approach, slowing down and speaking to them as the human that they are, and the person that is on your team who really, I'm sure, wants to see you succeed as much as you want them to help you succeed. It's slowing down to speak to them, to give them context as to, number one, where does their role fit into the overall organization, into the vision, into the mission of the business, the impact that they're having. And, when you get them a project, again, why are they doing that project? Where does it fit into everything? Taking the time to slow down to have, conversations with them that are not always business related. And it's harder to do with contractors, I understand, but at the same time, I think it's really important to do this as well. But, how often do you sit down with your team, or do you set aside time to talk to your team individually about, what are their goals? What are they trying to achieve, both in the business and outside the business? And what makes them tick, basically. So few CEOs of online businesses take the time to do that with their team. And when you do that, when you show legitimate human being interest in them, that is going to go such a long way. Now, that's not why you're doing it, but when you do that, you're going to get such a bigger buy-in, if you will, from that person or from your team when you take the time and initiative and effort to have those conversations. So taking a more human approach to your team. Two things come to mind when I'm sharing this is number one, I had this kind of conversation with somebody on my team a few years ago, and one of their goals was to take their family to Disney World. And they hadn't been able to do that in a long time because it's expensive to go to Disney World or to Disneyland, especially today. And I was like, all right, amazing. So I take note of that, and I let them know that I'm going to do whatever I can to help them make that possible. And I did. I was able to thankfully I was able to make that happen, and not for the entire trip, but I was able to contribute to make it, a sizable help in allowing them to do that. That goes such a long way, right? Because I legitimately care about this person, and I, thus care about their family and their happiness and all that stuff. How hard is it to be able to do those sorts of, and it doesn't even have to be like a trip to Disney World or anything like that. There is, and I don't have the name of it off the top of my head. I'll link it up in the show notes for today's episode over at rickmulready.com in the podcast section. But there's an assessment that you can take. It's like a $15 license fee for each person. And it's kind of like a love language for business. And you can have people on your team take this assessment, and it will tell you like what motivates them. We often think that money motivates people in terms of like, cash bonuses or whatever. And that might be true, but a lot of people are more motivated by, and enjoy more, maybe like experiences or giving them an excursion or public praise or just giving them additional paid time off or whatever it might be. We often assume that money is the biggest motivator for people when in fact, a lot of times it's something outside of that, but we won't know what that is until we actually take the time and effort to find out. So again, there's this assessment. It's like the business love language assessment. There's a better term for it, but I'll link it up in the show notes for today's episode. You click it, it's like $15. There's no affiliation for me. There's like $15 fee or something for per license, and it's great. It'll give you really good insight into each member of your team. So that's number one. Improve yourself as a leader in 2023 by taking a more human approach to your team. And I'll tell you right now that your team is craving this sort of effort by you. All right. Okay. Number two, pay very close attention. And this should go without saying, but this is super, especially here in 2023 where there's so much economic uncertainty and, stuff is changing so quickly. Pay very close attention to your market and the people that you serve. And there's a lot of different ways to go about this, like just baking time into your schedule to, read newsletters, listen to, specific content or people that you look up to or what have you. Talk to your people, talk to the people that you serve, talk to the people in your audience, talk to your customers, talk to your students. Make sure that you're getting feedback from them on what is most helpful to them. What are they struggling with? Are you solving that problem for them? What are their feelings about your offer or offers, etc.? And when you do this, when you pay close attention to this, it will give you a higher probability of if you need to make changes based on what's happening in, on day to day, let's say economy or the world or what have you, or your space, you're going to be able to make changes if necessary a lot more quickly. But it's going to be a lot harder if you're not paying attention, if your just head is down and you're just creating, all right, I'm just going to create content and I'm going to create my course and I'm going to just create content for my membership. And that's all I'm doing. Well, that's all well and good. And all those things are necessary, but you also got to be paying attention to what's actually happening in your market and listening to the people that you serve. I'm going to talk about listening more here coming up. Okay. Number 3, burnout. There's a bigger focus on the reality of burnout and the mental health side of running an online business. Okay. So my thought on this is that in 2022, last year, I spoke a lot about burnout and the mental health side of running an online business here on the podcast. And I was doing it. Honestly, I think that I was doing it before the conversation was really kind of more, I'm not saying I set a trend or anything like that. I was really thankful to be able to have that conversation before the topic of burnout kind of became more widely talked about, which I think is a really good thing that it's being talked a lot more about because so many people experience burnout, experience mental health issues that are caused by what's going on, like their business that they've created without realizing what's actually going on. And I'm raising my hand that was me for a long time. And I'll be honest, towards the end of 2022, I was feeling some burnout myself. it had been a long year, a lot of different reasons, and was recognizing that, but without, past history of the types of things I've gone through over the years. And I've talked about a lot here in the podcast about, my struggles with anxiety and depression and so forth. If I wasn't up sort of on really being in tune with, my emotion and body and all that type of stuff based on things that have gone on in the past and conversations I have with people, et cetera, I would have just thought like, oh man, I'm just failing, right? Like my brain isn't working. Well, no, there's something there's something deeper going on here. And I think there's going to continue to be a big focus in 2023 on burnout, on the mental health side of running an online business. Because again, it's been sort of like so taboo to talk about for so long. And I think that these topics will continue to be a big focus, especially as, the hustle and grind mentality and culture continues to be proliferated, especially in the online space, right? Like if you're not working 17 hours a day, you are failing. You're doing something wrong. You're not working hard enough. And I just think that's such a load of crap because we've talked about it on the podcast. And also going back to the team, like this is not just for us, right? As CEOs of our business and leaders of our business, we need to keep this, this mindfulness of burnout and mental health top of mind for our team and ensure that they're not experiencing burnout by what you are doing to help them not fall into burnout. Like what kind of resources are you providing for your team? And I say resources, this can be something as simple as, checking their workload, not making sure that they're doing 5 different roles on the team or, working 60 hours a week, et cetera, et cetera. You as the CEO have a responsibility to your team to ensure that, that burnout isn't happening for your team. And then if they are experiencing that, hopefully you've set up a culture in the business and in the team such that they're able to talk to you about that and that you can work together to help them navigate that. So I think this is going to be a really much bigger focus on in 2023, the reality of burnout and the mental health side of things. Okay, number 4 is values. If you've been listening to the podcast here for a while, you know that you shouldn't be surprised to hear me talk about values. I think that you are winning in your business when you are making decisions in your business through the filter and lens of your values. If you've not set up values for your business, then I really think you should make this a priority for 2023. This is not like a sit down for an hour and, come up with some values like this, really be thoughtful and take time to do this. We've heard a lot about this, I think in 2022 as well, is that especially nowadays, people want to buy from people and businesses and organizations who stand for something, whose values are prevalent. A great example of this is when the Patagonia founder came out in 2022 and said like all of their profits are going to a specific, I can't remember off the top of my head, I should look this up, but they're going to a specific cause. And it's like people who, believe in that and the cause that they're talking about, like you want to go support Patagonia because of that. And so by letting that be known, they're sort of making sticking a stake in the sand and saying, this is what we stand for. And so one thing and I've talked a lot about the journey of our values and the values that I've created in my business, and everything that we do in the business is through the lens of our values, from the type of, guests we have here on the podcast to the type of partners that I'm willing to partner with, to the type of, businesses that we allow in our Accelerator program. I turned a lot of just amazing people away from Accelerator in 2022, just simply because it's nothing personal. That doesn't make them a bad person at all. It's just like the business was outside the scope of the values of our values. And so when you start making decisions through the lens of your values, people are going to take notice. And so for us, we've made our values front and center on like our Accelerator page, right? So the application page for Accelerator, which is rickmulready.com/accelerator, has our values front and center on the page, right? Integrity, advocacy, vulnerability, kindness, and collaboration. And I describe what each one of those is. Side note, that was a big mistake I made early on when putting my values together for the business, where I just listed out integrity, then the next one, then the next one. And I didn't put any kind of context or meaning to what that means to me. And so, for example, advocacy being one of our values, we use our brand and platforms and channels to support people from all walks of life, right? So I could just put advocacy down there, and that could mean, 15 different things to 15 different people. Well, I'm putting down what this means to me and what this means to our business, right? Like integrity, for example, it's kind of a buzz sort of value. And it's very easy to say something like, oh, integrity is important because it's important that I do what I say I'm going to do. Okay, great. But let's take it deeper than that, right? And so for integrity for us, like in our team, it's a culture and it's not just a set of actions, for example. And then I go into, within the team and in the business, I go into more in-depth detail on what each one of these is. But the point here being is that if you don't have values, number one, let's get some values for what you stand for and what you want to be about, and make it known what those things are and why you've made those decisions, right? The other thing, just as an example, I remember sitting at dinner at our Accelerator retreat that we did here in San Diego back in October, and I was sitting next to a few members, and they were asking me about, hey, like, is it true that you make a donation to a charity when we join Accelerator? And I was like, yeah, we've actually been doing that for a few years now. And they were like, why don't you ever talk about that? And I don't know, I've always felt uncomfortable with it because it's like, I don't want to be like performative, if you will. Like, Lee, look at me. Like when someone joins Accelerator, we make a donation. But they were like, no, like we want to know, people want to know those things. Like if I'd known that, I remember this one person saying, if I'd known that you made a donation to the Trevor Project when I joined or when other people joined, like there would have been no hesitation when this person signed up, right? And not that they had, this person in particular did not have any hesitation because they signed up after learning about who I was in just a few days. But anyway, they were like, no, that just makes the decision so much easier to join a program where values are so important and you're actually doing something about it. And so, some of the charities that we donated to in 2022 include the Trevor Project, Bridging Tech, Vanessa Behan, Kula, Feeding America, To Write Love on Her Arms. A lot of these are related to kids. A lot of these are related to suicide prevention, LGBTQ plus suicide prevention in kids. A lot of causes that are very values-based and dear to me and the business. We now put it right on the sales page, basically for the program. And so that's just another example of it's guiding what we do and not being afraid to let people know what we stand for and why we do things. And again, people are going to be making a lot more decisions, especially going in 2023, about who they spend money with based on, do they stand for something? Do they have values? What are they? Because if they don't align with your values, that's okay. Then that's just, you are standing for something, and the people that, do align with what you're standing for, you are going to attract. And that's really what you want to be doing. Along with values, my last point on this is I like to say conversation over conversion. What I mean by that is not doing everything at the for the expense of a sale, right? So simple example of this is if somebody's on the fence about purchasing your program or, whatever it is, a membership or a course or coaching program, what mastermind, whatever it is, and they're on the fence, it's not trying to convince them to purchase. It's slowing down for a second. Number one, recognizing that they might actually, there might be a legitimate, something that's holding them back. So treat them like a human being and have a conversation with them to learn more about them and their challenges and sort of where they're coming from rather than, prioritizing the conversion, because it might not be a good fit for them. Maybe it is a good fit, but if it's not a good fit, being empathetic with that. And then if another offer from somebody else or another program or a different time or, a different payment option or whatever it might be is better suited to them, then that at least from the conversation, rather than trying to push and prioritize a conversion, right? So that is the fourth thought on 2023, values. Okay, now we'll kind of shift into sort of the marketing side of my thoughts in 2023. And this first one should go as no surprise whatsoever. It is, the prioritizing content creation. And this first one should come as no surprise whatsoever. And that is prioritizing content creation and then the marketing of that content creation. I think so many of us, myself included, I fell into this, and I talked about this on just a recent episode here on the show where, so many people create content, but then, and that's their primary focus, but then don't focus on the marketing of the content. And I know that I did that for a long time, and that's, a shift that I'm getting back to in 2023. But, short form video, again, this should be of no surprise. This has been, we started talking about this, I remember a few years ago. And now obviously with TikTok and Reels and YouTube Shorts, et cetera, short form video, if you're not creating short form video, you need to be, right? And, along these lines, no longer can you get by without producing some form of consistent primary content in your business, a podcast, YouTube videos. If your audience reads blogs, blog posts, consistent content. And then the key to that too is how can you create leverage to market that content? So for example, this podcast here, not only am I recording it, but I'm also, on video right now. And this video goes up on YouTube on my Art of Online Business podcast channel because the podcast consumption has started to pick up considerably with people watching podcasts. And so, and I'll talk about that here in just a second in terms of YouTube, but, I get to leverage this because it's audio, it's video, then we can create, short form snippets, if you will, standalone pieces of content from the video portion of this podcast to put on YouTube Shorts, to put on TikTok, to put on Instagram Reels, to put on Facebook, etc. Okay. And then along with the content creation and marketing, this has been around forever. And I feel like this is one of those things that was important. I remember when I first started in online business 9 years ago, it was super important. Then I felt like it kind of lost its steam, if you will. And now the importance of it has come back, especially with, the tracking issues that we've had post iOS 14.5 and everything like that. And that is SEO. So not only doing content, for the platforms, but is it searchable and can it drive traffic back to your website? Because again, I'm going to talk about data here coming up, but the more opportunity that we can get what we call first party data, which means when people are on our site or we're able to gather data from within the site from which we're working, rather than aggregating a whole bunch of data points like third-party tracking, the better off that we're going to be long term, right? So SEO is a great opportunity. It's not a short game play. This is a long game play, and it can be really, really powerful. So SEO combined with the content creation can be really powerful too. And also, along with the content creation, the customer journey is not as linear as it used to be, right? It's like people consumed, one type of content and that was what they did. And it was like, okay, I'm introducing myself as a business and then I'm introducing myself as what we do, et cetera. It's not as linear as it once was. It's like, people consume content all over the place and in, 18 different ways. I'm exaggerating, but they're consuming content in a lot of different ways. And so number one, if we're not on those platforms, now I'm not saying that you have to just jump right into making 18, we certainly don't do this. And it is a goal of here in 2023. But the idea is, are we meeting people where they are in their customer journey and having the right conversation? Too often I see people having the same conversation with everybody, right? And so if people, as an example, if people are ready to buy from you, well, that is a very different conversation with that person than somebody who doesn't even know you exist. And so we need to be leveraging the content that we're creating such that we are having the cliched right conversation with the right person at the right time. And we get to, going back to that term leverage, we get to create leverage through the content that with the content that we're creating, I should say, by repurposing it on different platforms and creating different types of content. Also on this short form content, I see there's a shift in especially the latter part on TikTok in 2022, the algorithm was really favoring, sort of the how-to or helpful pieces of content. I saw this sort of across the board as well. And I get a lot of feedback about the podcast here. And people tell me like, when you give strategies, meaning people tell me, they say, when you give strategies, when you tell us like, if this, then go do this, people love that. And I see like, this is concrete, small action steps in your content. I really think that's going to be, a winning formula for you in 2023 as well, in terms of your content. Okay. And the last piece of content creation and marketing in the short form video has to do with YouTube. This has been coming. It's kind of been, talked about a little bit here and there, sort of the second half, or maybe the probably Q4 of 2022 was, YouTube's prioritization of content and seeing a shift in that from really how the algorithm works, where they're creating a, more of an algorithmic connection, if you will, between the, YouTube shorts and the short form content to getting people to the long form content, where the YouTube shorts, for much of 2022, it was more so kind of like standalone content when, where it's going. And I think we saw this as to the reason, if you saw that YouTube came out with like, hey, choose a handle for your YouTube channel or YouTube content, it's a centralization of content that they're creating. So the idea there being more so that YouTube shorts and the short form content is sort of like the gateway into that longer form content, like your longer form videos, your longer form podcast episodes or trainings or whatever. Also, YouTube is getting into the podcasting game big time, and they're working on this now. No clue when this is going to officially roll out, but a while ago they hired a head of podcasting and they built out this team and so forth. Like they're working on this, and you can go to YouTube now and click on the podcasting section. It's really raw at the time recording this, but this is a focus for them. And so another reason why, if you are podcasting, you should absolutely, I think, be recording video as well, and then putting that video onto YouTube. Okay. Number 6 is, and for those of you who know me, you're not surprised by my saying this, is data. So we are in a really interesting spot, I should say place, in, the online world when it comes to data. Obviously, with iOS 14.5, that threw a big, clink into the viability of data and tracking and optimization and all that stuff. By the way, when that came out and I did an episode about that, like I said at the very beginning of this episode, that I'm not into like making forecasts or predictions or whatever, but I did say during that time, I said, you watch, Apple's doing this because they're going to come out with their own, advertising platform. And this is a competitive play, and they're putting the face of, we are advocates of privacy and all this stuff. And so anyway, look where we are now. Apple's absolutely doing that. And so anyway, data, metrics, okay? Most importantly, I saw this a lot from some of our accelerators this in 2022, was that they, especially new people coming in to the program, they didn't have any kind of true knowledge of how their marketing efforts were doing, especially on the paid ad side, in terms of meta ads, Facebook and Instagram. They were just looking at Ads Manager, and that was the data that we're relying on. Well, I've talked a ton about this here on the show, where you've got to be looking at data and metrics and stats from different channels so that you can, what I call, triangulate the data. So you're taking the data from Ads Manager, which is not very accurate, and then comparing it to Google Analytics. You're then comparing it to your email CRM, and you're comparing it to whatever kind of funnel software that you're using, right? And so you're taking all this data from the different platforms and trying to make sense of it and trying to like paint the best picture you possibly can to figure out how accurate or how well is my advertising, is my marketing, et cetera, actually working. And so you've got to be tracking your metrics. You got to be tracking attribution. This is more advanced, right? But the more that you can have insight into, these leads are coming from my Facebook and Instagram ads and then turning into sales, right? My social media channel, like my TikTok traffic, I can track that coming in from here, and they're doing XYZ, like as far as converting and buying, et cetera. So like I said, this is more advanced. And I mean, we are preparing for a cookieless world, if you will, right? Where, Google came out in the middle of 2022 that Google was pushing out the deprecation of third-party tracking and basically the sunsetting. They're not going to be allowing it from 2023 till 2024. And, stay tuned to see how that goes. But we are moving towards a more first-party, needing to rely on first-party data. First-party data, just as a simple example of that, is if you use lead ads on Facebook, for example, right? Because all the interaction takes place in the ad unit. Somebody doesn't click on your ad and go to an external landing page. It all happens within the platform, i.e. first-party data, because it's happening within the platform. First-party data would be like somebody is coming to your website and taking action or going like, and when they come to your site, you're asking them, you're letting them know about your cookie policy, et cetera, and they're agreeing to that. First-party data, right? Very, very soon, gone are going to be the days of, this third-party tracking, which is an aggregation of tracking basically to paint a picture of a user, right? So that's exactly why you get when you're on your phone and you get that prompt when you go to some other website, it's like, do you want to allow this, whatever, Yelp, whatever, I'm just off the top of my head, Yelp to track your, I forget what the wording is, but like across the internet or something like that. And you can say allow or don't allow. Like that's third party, because third party, again, is tracking sort of your journey throughout the internet and an aggregation of that data, and all of that from a privacy standpoint and all that sort of thing. That's going to be going away. And so, how can we be making those moves in terms of being able to do the best that we can to gather data, to gather metrics, to just to do it to begin with, because so many business owners that I see are not focusing on tracking data. It is a huge conversation I have with people when I'm working with them in Accelerator. We can't scale something when we don't even know like what's actually working. We have to spend that time to ensure that we have the proper metrics, the proper attribution, the proper data dashboard. Google Analytics 4 is going to be like, they're sunsetting, what I think, whatever they call it, universal analytics Google Analytics as we know it, this coming July, and everything is moving to GA4. And a big part of that is this moving towards a cookieless world. And they're using, artificial intelligence to do modeling and, performance modeling and all that stuff. But it's critical, right? Like you've got to be tracking your metrics. You've got to know your numbers, right? People, it's kind of a joke. They know that when they get on a call with me and I'm going to be coaching them, like you need to have your numbers, because I'm going to be asking your numbers. The numbers don't lie, right? It's just data, but it's telling the story of what potentially is going on. So you've got to make sure that you are tracking your data and making that a priority in your business, and not just obviously in the marketing sense. It should go without saying, you need to be tracking your business revenue, your expenses, your profit margin, et cetera, your cost to acquire a customer, your lifetime customer value, all those different types of things. Because when you know those numbers, knowing what to do next in your business becomes that much easier. Okay. Number 7. And this is a kind of a quick one. Not surprising that you're hearing this, from me. And I put it right here because it's piggybacking off the data, and that is paid ads, right? So again, if you're not making the effort to track the data and track the metrics and attribution and so forth, UTM codes, et cetera, when you're running paid ads, I literally would not be running paid ads, because we're just throwing money out there at our ads and being like, okay, I think this is working. I'll look at Ads Manager and it'll tell me a few things that I can trust, but most of it, no. But anyway, paid ads will be an opportunity to stay top of mind in 2023 with all of the economic uncertainty. This is not the time to stop marketing. Quite the opposite. What happens is people often pull back on their paid ad efforts because they're cutting back on spend during economic uncertainty. And so that leaves opportunities for those of us who see these openings, see these opportunities. So, and also what happens during these times often, because people tend to pull back on their spend, it will lower costs for you. So just keep an eye on that, right? Really look at this with the economic uncertainty that we are in leading into 2023. And, depending on who you ask, what, for the length of 2023 or what have you, this could be a great opportunity, a great time to lean into your marketing. Don't stop marketing. Okay. Obviously, if paying for ads is going to, not allow you to pay the bills and all that stuff, that's a different conversation. But this is, just because there's economic uncertainty doesn't mean like you stop all of your marketing. Quite the opposite. Okay. 2 more things. So number 8 is my thought on people are wanting more personalized attention, meaning students, your audience, your people that you serve, regardless of what niche you're in, they're wanting a more personalized experience from you. And so the question becomes, how do we offer that at scale? For me, in Accelerator, I've talked about this a lot, is I got feedback from our members sort of mid-year in 2022. And one of the things that they said aligned with what I'm sharing with you. They wanted even more one-on-one access to me in addition to a lot of what they were already getting in terms of access. And so for me, like that was something that really lit me up. I love diving deeply into somebody's business. And so I needed to make sure that I had the capacity to do that, both in terms of energy and time. And like, okay, how does this work? And so, and I've heard this from a lot of, business owners and so forth, that there is this shift going on. I'm not saying courses are dead. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that people are wanting more. They're tired of the experience where somebody buys a course and then they never see or hear from the creator of the course ever again. And, now if you're buying like a $14 thing, like that's a different story, right? But that's generally not the case of what I'm talking about here. I hear this a lot. So people are wanting a more personalized experience and more personalized attention. So how do we offer that, at scale? And again, like I've noticed over the past 8 to 10 months or so that students want support and attention beyond just a course. And so how might we do that? How might we build that in? Well, I also noticed a shift in the latter part of 2022 that a lot of, online CEOs were kind of going back to one-on-one because that's what they were hearing from, their audience, or at least in the form of group coaching, because people were tired of courses, right? And again, I'm not saying like I love course, like I love to sell a course, but it's when you do it the right way. Like I just heard this a lot. And again, I'm not saying that courses are dead in any way. I think with the right experience can be really, really powerful. Now, speaking of right experience, I think that, from a segmentation standpoint, the more that you can offer a sort of choose your own adventure that is based on you taking a person through the phases of growth in whatever niche that you're in, or through the phases of interest. If you're in the gardening niche, like you could start them out. I always pick the gardening niche and I really don't know a whole lot about it, but like starting them out from like doing like, planting little things in the house or, on the windowsill, and then moving to like a patio garden box or something like that. And then moving to a full backyard, like choosing your adventure and bringing them through that journey rather than like, and I'm not saying all in one course, by the way. I'm saying like, can you create an experience where somebody's able to do that? And then in addition to that, creating the community aspect of your offers. This is and I talked about this when I did this type of episode back in 2021 for 2022. People are still craving connection. They're craving authenticity. They're craving accountability and to be surrounded by others who are going through and working towards the same common goals. And so can we create that kind of community aspect within our program or within our programs to be able to deliver that to our members, right? And by the way, speaking of community, just a side note, like TikTok, social platforms like TikTok or Instagram, whatever, they're becoming more and more about community and less about just like, hey, how many followers do you have, right? This is a quality over community. And when you're creating content around creating that community and delivering on like to that community, that's when you'll be more successful, as opposed to, oh, I have, just, from a sheer quantity standpoint, number of followers and just trying to build the most followers as possible, like quality over quantity. And then lastly, when it comes to personalized attention, the offer, that sort of thing, refining your offer. How can you make it so that people cannot say no to your offer? Now, I'm not saying to manipulate them or anything like that. I'm just saying, how can you make your promise so clear that somebody completely understands it and is like, oh, that's exactly where I am. And you exactly solve my problem that I'm having in my business. Right. And so the clearer that we are, I like to call this like you're creating a space of one for yourself in terms of being the go-to in your niche. And you can do that through the offer that you create. And it's going to coincide with the last thing I have to say here in just a second, but always refining that offer. Just Accelerator, for example, a lot of people don't know this, but I've had an iteration of Accelerator now for probably 7 years. And it is in its current form, it is the best program that it's ever been in 7 years, because it used to be for like 4 people where it was, basically a high level of group coaching for Facebook ads years and years ago. Right. And so you're always iterating. You always want to be changing. Like for me, like I added in the one-on-one element to the program just 3.5 months ago. Right. And so you're always iterating. Here's a perfect example of, being more clear on your offer and making it just so that somebody completely understands it. It's a no-brainer for them and saying like, yeah, I got to have this. And so this was an example from one of our Accelerator members where, and I'm not going to name the niche, but they teach people in this niche how to use certain tools in the accounting space and, teaching them about taxes and so forth. And sort of like, that was the promise. Like, I will teach you this. And I was like, it's not super clear. It's not super compelling. And so I asked this person, like, what is the biggest challenge that your audience, like, what are they most interested in? And they were like, oh, they want to pay themselves and, they want to know more about taxes, et cetera. And I said, well, what if you shifted the promise of your offer and making sure, obviously, that you deliver on this in your program, where you said, I teach, the name of the people in the niche, how to pay themselves within 30 days. And you could even add, a caveat onto that, or I'll refund you 1.5 times the price of the program. Like, how clear is that? You're also exactly solving their number one problem and their number one desire, which is, I want to get paid. Like, show me how to get paid in my business. And so clarity around defining your offer and your promise and then messaging it. And so that you're helping people make the decision so much easier to join your program. Okay. My last thought. And I've talked about this one here on the podcast before, and I still think that not enough people do this in their business. And so I think this is a great opportunity for you. And a lot of this goes back to kind of what I was talking about, of people wanting more, personalized attention and support, et cetera, in their journey through your program or programs, is, this whole concept of listening. And I know it's a concept, right? But I want to kind of give you a framework here for listening, because this is one area that, unfortunately, this can allow you to set yourself apart. And I said unfortunately because I wish more people were doing it, is listening to your audience, listening to your students, especially the people who are paying you money for whatever it is that they're purchasing from you, whether it's a course or a membership or coaching or mastermind or whatever it is, like asking for feedback. And so that is number one, asking them for feedback on their experience with you. You can get specific on a lot of different things. Like if you got a membership, what if it were asking after 30 days, how is the onboarding process, or how is the onboarding process been going for you? And the key there is, number one, being really specific on what kind of feedback that you would like to get, meaning not necessarily like the answers. I mean, what do I want feedback on? So whether that is the program overall, or the results that you're getting, or the coaching that you're getting, or the onboarding experience, or the trainings, or whatever it might be, just be intentional with what you want feedback on. And then it's about coming up with a process for getting that feedback. what is the interval in which you're going to ask for that feedback? Is it monthly? Is it quarterly? Is it half a year? Is it hopefully not annually? But just as an example, something I have not done a very good job of is ask you, the podcast, my show listener, what you like, your feedback on the podcast. I've never done a good job of that. And so I'm going to be doing that on twice a year, biannual basis, where I ask you to just go fill out a few questions, just, enter to win something. But like, I want your feedback on what you like about the show, what you don't like, what would you like more of, what would you like less of, et cetera. What would they make this, something that just create an even better experience for you, that sort of thing. So number one, ask for feedback. And I used to think this was a sign of weakness, where I'm like, I'm not going to ask my students for feedback, because then I'm just sort of setting myself up for hearing how crappy something is or whatever. I had told this story in my head about this, and it's actually really, really powerful, and your students are going to respect you a whole lot more. Okay. So number one, ask for feedback. Come up with an interval in which you're going to, and how you ask it. What is the process? I would not ask for feedback on a group call, because people tend to feed off of each other based on how one person is responding. I would either do a survey, have them respond to an email. The survey can be anonymous or not anonymous. Get on Zoom calls with people, meaning individually. And you don't have to do 50 calls a month or something like that. But what if, you had, for every, you just choose 5 people randomly each month who join your email list, and reach out to them and ask them if they'd be willing to hop on a Zoom call for 15 minutes, and you get to know them more, right? Like, that is going to go so far in developing a relationship with them. It shows that you care, etc. Ask for feedback. Number 2, review and analyze that data that you got from the feedback. From your questions. So what is the feedback that you're getting? Some of it is going to be helpful for you. Others, it's not going to be helpful. But then it's up to you and your team to prioritize that data, again, first and foremost, through the lens of the values, because you're going to get feedback that is outside the scope of your values and is just not going to make sense for doing it in the business, right? Maybe it doesn't align with your mission or your vision or whatever it might be. So prioritize that feedback based on, all right, these are the top 5 things I'm gonna roll out or potentially test out in the next 6 to 8 months or 10 months or whatever it might be, right? And so prioritize, create a board in your project management tool. We use ClickUp, so create a ClickUp board or Asana, whatever it is, and then start assigning, to the team, etc. So review and analyze the data, and then communicate those changes to your students, to your members, based on their feedback. When they hear that you are making changes based on the feedback that they gave, it is going to make them feel so valued and be so appreciated. And so when you communicate, give them context as to what are you going to test? What are you not going to test? And give them, why you're making those decisions. It makes them feel part of what you have going on, and it shows them that you care, et cetera, et cetera. This is also going to increase customer experience that people have with you and your business, and also retention. So if you have a whole bunch of products, if you've got a membership, et cetera, if you're coaching, people are going to stay around a whole lot more with a business who cares about them, cares about their feedback, cares about getting them results, et cetera. And you can do this through this feedback loop that I'm sharing with you right now. And then the final step of that is just test, right? So the priorities that you come up with, you're communicating what you're going to focus on first, and then pose it as a test. Like, I call it a pilot. So I'm going to pilot these changes here, and for this amount of time, for the next 90 days, and see how it is. See how I like it, see how you like it. Then I'm going to come back to you and gather your feedback, and then repeat this process again. So be intentional, take the initiative to ask for feedback, to listen to your students, to your audience, to your members, etc. So there are 9 thoughts on different areas, different topics that I think are going to be really, really important to pay attention to set yourself apart, to create a healthier, more sustainable business, and to serve the people that you want to serve on a much deeper and bigger level. Okay. Now, I have thoughts on a whole bunch of other things like, about like AI and all this other stuff. But I think I wanted to kind of like consolidate this as best I could. I mean, we've been going for an hour now. And so hopefully this was helpful. This is probably going to be, a multiple listen episode for you. But as always, thank you for tuning in today. I super appreciate you. If you have any questions on any of this stuff, please feel free to shoot me a DM over on Instagram and ask away. I'm at Rick Mulready there on Instagram. Happy New Year, my friend. And until next time, be well. I'll talk to you soon.